Welcome back to Sophie and Sebastian, a podcast of stories for the child in all of us. In this episode, Sophie organizes her own birthday party. The birthday party. Winter was in the air and Sophie's birthday was coming up. Her wish list had been stuck to the fridge for weeks. It was not a long list, and she wasn't asking for much. 1, a pony. 2, a dog. 3, a kitty. And 4, lots of candies. "I just love animals," she said to Mum, "and animals love me. The other day, some geese were flying by, and when I waved to them, they honked at me." "But we don't have room for a pet." "That's not true. The pony can go in the backyard, and the dog and the kitty can sleep on my bed." "I don't think there would be much sleeping." "I will sing them to sleep." "That won't be necessary," said Mum. "Why not?" "Because we're not getting a pet." And that was the end of the conversation, though Sophie said a few more things. Then Sophie had another idea. She got out her crafty things and made cards. Since Mum wasn't being helpful, she got her older sister Tessa to spell out the words. Next, she found Sebastian. He was outside building a fort out of leaves. "You have to deliver the mail," she said. "Okay," said Sebastian, and he raced off to put on his mailman clothes. The next day, when Bert and Fran opened their mail, there was a card from Sophie. Mrs. Wilson, across the road, got almost the same card. It read, "Dearly beloved, you are invited to a birthday party. You can bring a present, or two. There will be cake and tea. Bring your own candies, please. Yours truly, Princess Sophie. Psst, I'm not allowed to have a pet." "How nice," said Fran to Bert. "I wonder if her mum knows," said Mrs. Wilson to her cat Darcy. After that, the days flew by. The leaves had been raked, the geese had flown south, and the mornings were white with frost. Sophie's birthday was just around the corner. Sophie was a flurry of activity. She put up decorations and she helped bake a cake. It was covered with chocolate icing and Oreo crumbs, with candy worms poking out. "It looks like a garden," said Sophie. "I think Bert will like it." "We can bring him a piece," Mum suggested. "That won't be necessary." "If you say so." Sophie's birthday fell on a Saturday. Sebastian was the first one up, and he made sure that no one else could sleep in. He liked to climb into people's beds and put them in a headlock. Sophie could hear his triumphant cry from Mum and Dad's bedroom. "You're never going to get out!" "Oh, no, not again!" shouted Dad. But Sophie was trying to listen for other noises. She was hoping to hear a bark, or a meow, or maybe even some neighing. The house was as quiet as a mouse. Even a mouse would be okay. Sophie sighed. She got out of bed and put on her nicest dress. "Let's hope at least I get some candies," she thought. When Sophie got to the dining room, there were all her presents neatly wrapped. One was bigger than all the rest, and Sophie shook it. No sound. "Maybe it's a bunny rabbit," Sophie thought. "They're pretty quiet." Then Sebastian came in and screamed, "Happy birthday!" as loud as he could. He even had a hug to spare. Soon the whole family was up and about, and Mum said, "When would you like to open your presents?" "Not yet," said Sophie. "I want to wait as long as possible." "What for?" "You'll see." A little later, Sophie asked Mum to make some tea. "Tea?" Mum said. "So we can have a tea party." "Okay then, but you're acting rather strangely today." The tea was steeping when there was a knock on the door. "Who could that be?" said Mum. "I bet I know," said Sophie. She put on her princess crown. "Let's go open the door," she said. When the door opened, there were Bert and Fran and Mrs. Wilson. Mum was surprised. "Good morning," said Sophie. "I'm glad you could come to my birthday party." "Party?" said Mum. "Yes," laughed Sophie. "Surprise!" And then she spoke very fast. "You didn't know it, but I planned it all. I'm good at planning. I made the invitations and everything." Then Mrs. Wilson showed Mum her card. "Look," she said, "an invitation from the palace." "Isn't that special?" said Mum. She had an odd smile on her face. "You better come in," she said. So they all came in, and Sophie served everyone tea and worm cake. She said, "When you drink the tea, you have to put your pinky in the air, but the worms you can eat any which way you like." Which is just how Sebastian was eating them, for his face was covered with chocolate, and half a worm was dangling from his mouth. "Yummy," he said. "No, crummy," said Dad. "Delicious," everyone agreed. "Now presents," said Sophie. Then they played a game where everyone hid their presents, and Sophie had to find them. When Sophie was far away from a present, they said, "You're cold," and when she got close, they yelled, "You're hot," or "You're on fire, you're burning up." But Bert and Fran's present was the hardest to find, because Bert would only say, "You're cold." Sophie finally found his present in the freezer. From Mum and Dad, Sophie got a book about ponies, and some funky socks with dogs on them, and a beautiful new doll. Dad said, "It's not a pet, Sophie, but you can always call her Kitty." "She's beautiful," said Sophie. "I will take good care of her." Then she dropped the doll on the ground so she could open Bert and Fran's present. First she read the card. Actually, Mum read the card, and this is what it said. "Happy birthday, Princess Sophie, and thank you for all the joy you bring to our lives. Things are rosier with you around. The flowers look more joyful when you pick them. And when we find the time to admire the little things, a ladybug or a toadstool, we actually find we have more time. As for your present, we understand that pets are off limits, but you can still give our present a good snuggle. Love, Bert and Fran." Now Sophie was curious. She took off the paper wrapping, and guess what? It was a stuffy. It was a white polar bear. "Now I know why it was in the freezer," said Sophie. "I will call him Polly the polar bear," said Sophie. "And now I have a doll and a stuffy, which is almost as good as a pet." Then she added, "Plus I can always pretend that Sebastian is my pet." "I'm not a pet," said Sebastian. "You could be a super cute doggy." Sebastian thought about it. "I will be a lion," he said, "and then I'll eat you up." "Okay," said Mum. "Why don't you open your last present from Mrs. Wilson?" So Sophie opened her last present. It was a book of poems. "They're children's poems, and one or two are by yours truly," said Mrs. Wilson. "For a long time I gave up writing because my fingers were too sore. But when I sat on my porch there was just too much to describe. Even the arrival of the mailman was exciting." She winked at Sebastian. "I have added a little poem in the front just for you, Sophie." Mrs. Wilson read the poem. "Happy birthday, birthday girl. How we love to watch you twirl, swirl, whirl, glitter, glide, shimmer, glimmer, skip and slide. Oh, our rough and tumble princess, dresses flowing, freckles glowing. We just love to hear the sound, pitter-patter, chitter-chatter, every time you come around." too many weird words, said Sophie. But I like it anyway. Then everyone laughed, and Sophie asked why English had to be such a difficult language, and Sebastian said that it's not, because English is just like English muffins, and everyone likes those. When the cake and the tea were finished, Sophie insisted that they play a game. So they played musical chairs, and Sophie's older brother Lucas played the piano. When he ran out of things to play, he just made up modern music. Mrs. Wilson was the slowest, and then Sophie's new doll, and Polly the polar bear couldn't keep up. In the end, Sebastian won, and Sophie said she let him. Then Sophie said that he should have a prize. What kind of prize? Asked Mum. How about candies, she said, and then he can share with the rest of us. All right then, said Mum. So they shared their candies, because that's what friends do. Then Mrs. Wilson and Bert and Fran went home, though first Sophie made them pinky swear that they would all stay best friends forever. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share with others and leave a comment or a review. Bye for now.